And now, the Saxenian family presents Let's Rage Coogs, streaming on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and you're listening to another episode of Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family. Joining me here, James Mueller of the Daily Cougar. James, we are coming off one crazy game. The Houston Cougars overcame a 19-point deficit in the fourth quarter to come back and get their third win of the season. Joining us as well, Dunlap. First of all, how are you two doing?
Still trying to process what just happened.
Yeah. Oh my God. A crazy game. They were down 19. They were down 26-7, and they somehow they willed a victory. They pulled it out of thin air. And I mean, where can we start? There's so many places where we can start. Dan, I'll toss it over to you. Just initial reaction from that game.
What a comeback. What a comeback. I mean, ugly to watch. The most part of the game was
the first three quarters.
The first three quarters, almost first full whole game, except what the last
13 minutes.
Yeah, 13 minutes, whatever it was. Man, just what a comeback. Complimentary football. We talked about it the other day. Defense coming up with stops, offense and special teams, making plays. Man, what a game. What a comeback.
James, what about you? What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it earlier this week, but just last year, a bunch of the ways they won games were because of special teams. Marcus Jones making some incredible plays. Tonight, you get that Jace Rogers return after Memphis seems to get that momentum back. That quick touchdown there. And then Kyle Ramsey, who's probably the biggest unsung hero of the game, hasn't played, comes in, obviously converts the extra points, but just executes a perfect onside kick, just with perfect bounces to even give UH the chance. You saw those special teams step up, and then also you saw, that Clayton Tune from the fourth quarter in overtime against UTSA. This was a different type of tune than we've been seeing in the past weeks. With like 3 minutes left, that 4th and 11, he should have been sacked. Scrambles out of that.
Yeah.
He willed them to a win as well.
No, absolutely. And you bring up a great point. I think another unsung hero is Christian Trahan, who, I mean, we talked about in our previous shows how really had disappeared from the offense. They weren't even targeting him. We kind of saw that during last week's game where they started to target him a little bit more. He had a couple of drops. And in this game, he was much more cleaner. He had 5 catches, 73 yards. And he's the one that actually came up with that onside kick. Which was huge. And I think overall, just big props to the Houston Cougars because, man, whenever they started that rally, and I probably rewrote my story for Gallery Sports 3 different times with the way the game ended out. Just they continued to keep scoring. Jace Rogers, who early in the game, he had that big pass interference. I believe he was called for pass interference on first drive of the game for Memphis, which led to them being able to drive down the field and score a touchdown on their first drive. And he had that spark. He had that 100-yard kickoff that you alluded to, James. And really just overall, I think it's impressive, the fight that they showed. For me, that even had they not won, it would have shown that this team is still very, very invested in the season. Now they just continue to fight, and they were able to pull off the stunning victory. And now, honestly, they might have just saved their entire season. It might have just changed the entire complexion. Now they're going to be heading into their bye week, and kind of a coincidence that they won 33-32. Now their record is 3-3. They're 1-1 in the American Athletic Conference, and they get a chance to have the bye week to kind of settle down and kind of have a soft reset, which is really going to be huge.
Yeah, for sure. And just going off that, you saw the relief. I think Andy, you tweeted about it. Just Holgorsen and Doug Belk just hugged him after you could see that. And one other crazy thing I wanted to bring up, credit to Steve Helwick of Underdog Dynasty for pointing this out. But in 2014, 2015, and 2017, Memphis held double-digit leads in 2014, 2015 going into half. Houston held a double-digit lead in 2017 going into half. All 3 of those times, those were blown leads. So we saw another one. It's just like this trend is just crazy with Houston and Memphis. We see it in basketball and football. I mean, I don't know.
What a rivalry between Houston and Memphis. I would love to see the rivalry continue, but I mean, it was much of what it was from last week as far as Clayton Tune having time to throw the ball early, not hitting receivers, not throwing them open, being antsy in the pocket, not stepping up, and then all of a sudden he started to make plays and started to make throws. And we've been saying, well, I've been saying this from a quarterback with his experience and the talent that he's shown in moments. I mean, give your receivers an opportunity. You see the numbers from the Browns, the Trey Hands, the Tanks, the
Yeah.
Matthew Golden. You see everyone. Like I said this the other day on the podcast, all those players have talent. You got to give them chances to make plays. And he did that, and they made a ton of plays. And one of the biggest plays of the game was when Tune scrambled out and threw it back across the field, and Tank went up and catch to keep the drive alive. Man, it was just every player contributed to this win and made play after play after play on offense and defense. I mean, situational football, they stepped up. Everyone needed to make plays. The running game was effective enough early in the game. They had to abandon it because they got behind and they had to throw the ball. But man, the defense stepped up and Clayton Tune got it done when they needed to get it done the most.
Absolutely, and I think that the other key point right there, the defense, I have a comment right here, first of all, by In Orbita, that just mirrored that the Cougars commit less penalties today than before. No, you are right on the money. They committed the least amount of penalties they have all season. They were only called for 7 penalties that were accepted against them for 77 yards. So still a pretty significant number, but overall, 3 of those 7 penalties came in the first quarter, and Houston overall was able to do a much better job of cleaning it up after the first quarter. And what I was going to say in terms of the defense, they gave up those 14 points in the first quarter to Memphis, but I feel like they did a really, really good job, especially in the second and third quarters, of holding Memphis to, I think they only hold them to 6 points total for that second and third quarter. You start that, especially towards the beginning of the fourth quarter, it seemed like the defense was starting to get a little tired because the offense had struggled in that third quarter. But I mean, give props to them. They were able to bend but not break. They held Memphis to just field goals after that first touchdown in the fourth quarter, and give props to them, because if Memphis can drive down the field and put it away, it wouldn't have mattered whatever Houston had been able to do on offense late.
Yep, held them to a field goal. The defense, like much of the seasons, played well enough for Houston to win. Just like last game, I think they played well enough for Houston to win. And appreciate you for joining them. It was a very ugly overall. Still looked a mess, but 3 drives. But yeah, man, the defense played well enough to win, just like last week. And this week, the offense was able to make enough plays. And like to Brandon Campbell's comment last week, where he said they seem to play their best with their backs behind the wall. And man, did they. And I think that's what we need to see more of from an offensive philosophy perspective. Simple things down, less huddle, get back to the line of scrimmage, and run hurry up offense to I don't know, it just seems to work better philosophy wise when they're up tempo. Clayton is getting the ball out of his hands quick. He had a ton of time all day to make throws. And so the offensive line played well. It's just finally he started making throws down the field, and receivers, they made plays.
And also adding on to your point about the defense, credit to the defense for, 18 seconds. You never know with this Houston defense. So, come up with that game Elias Bell coming up with that, sack to seal the deal. Memphis just needed a field goal to win. So, yeah, that's another encouraging point for them, knowing, just getting that taste of knowing that they can get that stop when it matters most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably the bigger thing, that the defense was able to end the game with a sack. And it's, again, going back, it's been the story of the entire season, where they've been in similar situations for, I think this is now the 5th out of the 6 games they played that literally came down to the final possession of the game. And it's big by Elias Bell. He was able to bring down Seth Hennigan, and really it kind of showed what he said during his weekly availability, where he said a lot of it had to do with execution and being able to finish play. That's something that Doug Belk himself too, and Holgorsen himself mentioned. That was the emphasis all week: execution, having a good start, having a good finish. Houston didn't have a good start in this game, but they were certainly able to finish. And going back to something that Brandon Campbell said after the end of last week's loss to Tulane, for whatever reason, whenever this team's has their back against the wall. It seems to be when they're at their best. And again, there's still a lot to clean up. Don't get me wrong. There were a lot of mistakes, just overall whenever you're in a 26-7 hole. But I think right now a much needed win, and certainly has a lot of fans excited. And a comment that I believe it was Miles that said it, where it's just a flash of, again, going back to the theme of the season, it's there in flashes, which is probably what makes a lot of the struggles that they've had more frustrating for Houston fans, because they show right there the potential that they have been of being, a dominant team. They just haven't been able to keep it together for a majority of games. But at the end of the day, that's probably the reason why they're at 3-3 and 1-1 in conference play, because of that inconsistency all season long.
Yeah, for sure. Or were you going to say something else, Andy? Or
No, go ahead.
One thing I wanted to bring up and just get everyone's thoughts on as well was just tonight was, I think, the best job in terms of spreading the ball around. You look at the stats. Obviously, Keaton Carter came up huge with some big plays at the tail end of the game. But Sam Brown, 9 catches, 116 yards. Christian Trahan, like we already mentioned, 5 for 73. Golden, 4 for 55. I mean, it was more. Tune had more reliable options this time instead of just having to go to Tank. And so that's another thing we've been hearing about, the receiver depth all season, but we really haven't seen it that much outside of a few plays here and there. So tonight, I feel like that's another thing that just that stood out to me a lot. And I want to get y'all's thoughts on that as well.
Dan, you can take it first.
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of a little bit just talked about it. I agree. That stood out to me. And I put it more on the emphasis of Clayton Tune. I mean, I think they've been having that ability to make those plays. I just think it's on him to give them spread the ball around and put them in a position to make plays and to his own admission. They said it during the broadcast that Clayton Tune, one of the things he said was he has to do a better job of giving them more opportunities to make plays, even if they don't have much separation or they aren't just wide open. And so I think they did a great job of doing that, and a great job of play calling to do that, not just so Tank focus and take focused on getting him the ball, in which rightfully so you should. He's so good and so electric, you want to get him the ball, but sometimes you need to get other receivers establish a rhythm and establish that they are a threat to open up Tank and some of the other offense. I think Christian Trahan, he was a really, really big key, I think, in this game. I know he had 5 catches and 73 yards, but the timely catches that he made, hit the run after catch, it was very, very impressive. And Brown, he really looked like a solid receiver. He had plenty of chances, and he made plenty of plays. And so did Golden, so did Carter. Everyone pretty much made the play when they got their number called. And I think the offensive line, we have to give them credit, because we called them out when they had the holding penalties and all the penalties that they've had, but they gave Clayton plenty of time to go through all his reads, all his options, and make throws down the field. And when he didn't have it open, he scrambled out, made some plays. But in the end, I think the offensive line deserved credit, because he had time to make plays. I think he could have easily thrown for 500 yards if he would have played like this for all 4 quarters instead of throwing 60 passes and just over 350 yards. I mean, kudos to him, but I think it's still more offense left out on the field in which they can do more.
And on that note, I want to bring the attention to the banner you see there in the my left-hand corner, in the very corner right there. Hoop and Holler, one of our other sponsors of the show. Obviously, we want to give a big shout out to the Saxenian family for being the primary sponsor of the show. Also, Hoop and Holler, the Houston Semi-Collective. Big news when it comes to NIL and the University of Houston on Friday, September 7th, with the official launch of Lincoln Cougs. The full NIL collective was launched today. And on that note, we'll bring in Justin Barbosa and Aqib Gazi. First of all, guys, how are y'all doing after that crazy game?
Man, can y'all hear me? First of all,
yes, sir. You are good.
Man, what a game! I mean, I was very close to turning it off in the fourth quarter. I'll be honest. Like, the score was 26-7 in the fourth, with 14 something left in the game, and like I'll be completely honest. Like, I was about to turn it off, and then we get a quick touchdown, and then from there on, I think we end up scoring 4 4 touchdowns in a row on 4 consecutive drives, which is like that's kind of the Clayton Tune. I'll be honest, that's the Clayton Tune that we saw. Obviously, it was a plethora of things like with the special returns, with the 100-yard kick return, among other things. But Clayton Tune, he played the way that we thought he would play leading up to this season.
Justin, I'll toss it over to you. What were your overall takeaways of that game?
Yeah, man, after that first half, I was switching between the Cougars and the Rockets game, but I'm just glad the Cougars able to pull it off. Yeah, just what Aqib said. He looked like the Clayton Tune of last year, just patient in that pocket, looking for his receivers. And Dayon said it earlier, he had a lot of time in that pocket, and especially these last 2 weeks, I want to give credit to the offensive line. They've been a lot better, not as much penalties, and Tune with a lot of time, able to find his receivers, and what a game from Samuel Brown. I mean, this looked like the Dana offense that we recognized from West Virginia in the time when he was with Houston as an offensive coordinator. I mean, got to give credit to him and the staff. I mean, they looked much better those last 2 drives. And my question for y'all is, do y'all think Dana took over the play calling those last 2 drives?
Justin, that's a great question. I was literally, it was going through my head. I was just thinking about it. Certainly, it'd be something interesting to see what Holgorsen says post game, and we're still waiting for UH Athletics to hopefully send that video in before we have to close things out. But I think I wouldn't be surprised. There was definitely a shift in terms of how Houston was play calling in that fourth quarter, and to be honest, some of it probably had to do that they were down 19 points. So you might as well try to do whatever you could to try to claw your way back. But I think there were still flashes of there. I mean, I can't remember what exactly the drive it was. I think it was the second to last offensive drive for Houston where they were on a 3rd and 10, and they called the draw for Stacey Sneed, which went nowhere. And it set up that 4th and 10 for Clayton Tune, which, I mean, props to Tune because he pulled something out of thin air with that play. It looked like he was going to get sacked probably 2 or 3 different times. He fought through Memphis defenders, and then here came the second wave of defenders, and he still found a way to avoid them and somehow get to the sticks to pick up the first down and keep that drive alive. And then he did it again a couple plays later when it was a 4th and 7. He found Tank Dell, and that's the play where it ended up into a Keyshawn Carter touchdown right before the I can't remember if it was. I'm pretty sure it was right before the onside kick, which again, just overall, had the game ended there, I think that would have shown they have a fight. And then the onside kick happens to be able to keep composure, to go drive down the field and score another touchdown. It shows big props to Clayton Tune for being able to again. That's one of those plays that. At the end of the day, again, like James said, going back to the UTSA game, he just put the team on his shoulders and decided to make a play out of something and carry the team to the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been saying like all season. Just want to interject real quick that I think that we needed to be more in like a hurry up type offense. So that's what I saw tonight for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely the offense clicks into a different gear when you see some urgency. I did see, obviously, first quarter was still a problem, but they did take a few, not like major shots, but they did, first play of the game through 15 yards down the field. So there was some improvements in that, but you'd like to see that urgency and aggressiveness more from the start because, like we've seen, they've been able to score points in a hurry in most of their games, down the stretch of things when they're, forced to go fast. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely don't disagree. I think, trying a more up-tempo offense, showing some more aggressiveness just out of the gates could be a quick fix to those first quarter problems. And then, maybe you don't find yourself in these positions where you're down 17, maybe you're up 17, just having to protect the lead.
Real quickly, Dan, before you make your point, I want to give a huge shout out to Juan Miranda right there for being a supporter of the show. Great comment by him. Appreciate y'all having the post-game discussions. Fourth quarter, Dana is the coach we hired in need. Dana's positivity today, just from the clips I saw, was a big change in my opinion. I hope he continues to evolve here at Houston. Go Cougs. And once again, big props to Juan Miranda for supporting the show right there. As you see it on the screen, $20 donation to the show, which helps us to keep going. So we appreciate you, Juan. Dan, I'll toss it over to you. What were you going to say, sir?
Now, I was just going to say, man, I think that the defense deserves a lot of credit for this comeback. I know the offense will get a bunch of the glory, but we have to give the defensive credit. One of the last drives that come to mind when they held Memphis to a field goal, which still kept it at a 2-possession game at that time. I think it was at 16, if my memory is certain correctly. But just all the stops that they got to able to keep the offense with a chance to keep the game alive, and then finally finishing the game. I mean, I think the defense deserves a bunch of the credit for this win, and they played. They gave up a lot of a few big plays, couple trick plays, but overall, they've been playing winning football for the majority of the football games. It's just a stat that Andy found later in the week is how Houston is outscoring opponents in the fourth quarter. And I mean, once again, they just struggled lightning in the bottle in the fourth quarter. But man, the defense has to get a bunch of credit because I know the offense is going to get their glory, but the defense is really, really held it down, and special teams.
Yeah, absolutely. The special teams was the.
I saw that missed field goal.
We're not going to talk about the bubble. That's a missed field goal that missed way wide left, and I believe it even missed the net.
I think any of us could have kicked it a little bit.
Man,
I mean, I'm not I play a little soccer, but I feel like I don't know how you miss it that bad. I've seen some missed kicks.
I won't go that far because whenever it was the Super Bowl in 2017 and they had that NFL access, I did try to kick. It is much harder than it looks.
It is definitely. But as if you're a college kicker, you can't miss like that badly. I didn't exactly see how that
was ridiculous.
Play transpired.
King Donja makes a great point. I believe when I saw the replay, it did look like the laces were facing towards. Which obviously affects the kick a lot. It was a very odd kick the way it ended up happening. But sticking to that play and that drive specifically, it was a bit of an interesting call by whoever the play caller is, whether that was Dana Holgorsen and the rest of the coaching staff. They had 5 seconds left in the game, or 5 seconds left in the first half. They were inside Memphis's 5-yard line. 5 seconds. They had just dumped off a pass to Christian Trahan. They had taken 7 seconds, and they opted to not try to score for a touchdown. They settled for a field goal, which, like we just talked about, resulted in it being wide left. What do you guys think about that play call right there, especially in that moment? It certainly felt like Houston should have been more aggressive and at least tried for a field goal, touchdown, whether it was maybe taking a 50-50 ball to one of your receivers if you see anyone in single coverage, kind of like we saw with Sam Brown in one of the 2-point conversions earlier.
Yeah, if I could take that first, I think they should have. I think Andre Ware did an outstanding job calling the game, breaking down plays, breaking down replays, giving explanations. And I think in that moment, he explained it correctly. They could have threw a play, would have went 3 or 4 seconds and still had a second or two to attempt a field goal. So I think they, without a doubt, should have been aggressive and tried to throw the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, I was surprised too, just given Dana's history. Like, I think back to like one of the defining plays of Dana's head coaching career. I forget if it was like 2017 or 2018, but when he was with West Virginia and they scored late against Texas and went for 2 with Will Grier, scored that to win the game. Like, I just think of him as an aggressive guy. So I figured they would, throw a quick slant or a little fade or something, because worst case scenario, as long as Tune gets the ball out of his hands right away, they have 1 second left and you still get the field goal. But that it also brings up a point. I probably think that Dana's going to stick with Kyle Ramsey as the place kicker now for at least for a little while, because both his extra points were straight down the middle, and then obviously, I mean, they're not going to onside kick a bunch, but I mean, it was as perfect as it could get. I think he proved that he deserves a shot out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Aqib, before you go, I do need to give a shout out to Ben Moore as well, who for helping us out with the show, being a supporter of the show. With his $2 there, we need to replace the kicker and the holder. They did replace, like we just alluded to, the kicker and Kyle Ramsey. And James, I think you make up a great point, especially going back to training camp. Some of the stuff that Dana Holgorsen said, where Kyle Ramsey and Bubba Baxa, their kicking competition went deep into training camp, and for much of what Holgorsen told us during the training camp availability, it was neck and neck between the two. And Bubba Baxa was just able to get the advantage over Ramsey. But I agree with you, James, that he looked real good in terms of his extra points that were right down the middle. And Aqib, I'll toss it over to you. What were you about to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna, jump off of that. What James was saying about the kicker. I think it was Kyle Ramsey, right? So
Mm.
it's interesting that late in the game you make a kicking switch, and then it wasn't like on a field goal. I could see maybe if it was like a 30, 40-yard field goal, we switch kickers, or we elect to like not, kick a field goal and we go for it or something. But to make a kicking change like that late, that doesn't typically happen, and just on an extra point too. So I think it was like he kicked 2 extra points, correct? So, and then he kicked the onside, which like the onside kick was perfect. The bounce was perfect. We even actually touched the ball a couple of times before it landed, which is like, thank God, that landed in I think it was whose hands was it? I think was it Golden?
The one you recovered?
Yeah. Trahan.
Christian
So
Trahan.
yeah, so I mean, we touched it. We touched the ball even before that, but anyways, yeah, it's interesting. I felt like he just Coach Holgorsen just decided like things needed to change, even as small as like a kicking change that kind of changed the outcome of this game for sure.
Another adjustment was putting Jace Rodgers back at kick return because it was Sawyer for the first half, and so that's another special team adjustment that was made that you got to give credit to because we saw the effect that Rodgers have on the kick return that he had.
And James, Dan, I have a question. I guess it's for around the panel. They did attempt 2 onside kicks, and I can't remember was Baxter the one that kicked the first? I'm trying to go back and look.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was. And that one was questionable because it was like 7 minutes left, and UH had all 3 timeouts.
I think it only went 7 yards too.
Yeah, desperate
to recover it.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back to the plays, but I mean, honestly, that might have been what resulted in the change at kicker because,
good point.
I mean, that onside kick didn't look good either, and I'm trying to find the plays. I can't find it. I'll bring it up if I can, but overall, and obviously, the kind of story of the season when it comes to injuries for Houston, they were without one of their lead running backs and Tajon Henry, and when you look at the rushing numbers for Houston overall, Brandon Campbell finished as the leader in rushing for Houston, 53 total yards on 12 carries. Stacey Sneed was second with 24 yards on just 4 carries. Clayton Tune, only the 3rd leading rusher for Houston, and a couple of some other stats for Houston overall on the night. Clayton Tune was only sacked once. The Cougars did have 7 tackles for loss go against them, but I think that was like we alluded to at the beginning of the show. Clayton Tune, there were a lot of moments when he had a lot of clean. He had a lot of time to be able to throw, and that's kind of again going back to some of the frustrations early on and the interception that he threw. It wasn't necessarily a pressured pass. He had all day to throw, but it was just him locking in on Tank Dell, and it's something that like we trying to find the comment Jeff Purdue said, Ware called out so much stuff during the game, during the broadcast, and damn, like you mentioned it, immediately after he threw the pick, Andre Ware was right on it, where Tune had locked on Dell that entire play, and he still threw it, and the defensive back for Memphis read it all the way and was able to come away with the pick.
Yeah, that was an ugly interception right there. I was one more of those. I would have been like, please, can we come for somebody else? But hey, he turned it around. We got the victory. But it's often plays like that. We had a bunch of time whether he didn't step up in the pocket or he'll step outside to the right. They give you defense time to close in on him and not allow the play to continue to develop. And so, I mean, his pocket awareness has to improve. 5th-year senior, I expected more, so I can only speak for me in my opinion. I mean, when I give him credit for closing out the game and getting the victory, but much of that game, I didn't see much of nothing to write home about, nothing to brag about from the quarterback position. But I will give him his credit. I mean, you make the plays that you need to make to get the win, and he did that, whether it's running the football, throwing the football, doing whatever it takes, putting his body on the line. I give him credit for doing that. But most of that game, it was ugly. And the running game was effective to an extent. The running backs almost average about 5 yards a carry. They just get behind so much that you have to abandon the run, and you have to get pass happy just to try to stay in the game. And so it's not like the running game isn't effective. I think it could be more effective on situational football and short down, especially goal line. You got to be able to move the winner line of scrimmage and be able to run the football in. I will say they should have been able a better job of doing that, because those goal line stands was something that Houston hurt them, but they were able to overcome it. But that's something they can't have.
Yeah. And speaking on the running game, Brandon Campbell, he finished with 53 yards. 34 of those came on that one long run. So there's got to be improvements there, because like you said, you can't have the ball at Memphis's 4-1 and come away with 0 points out of all the, in 2 drives. So yeah.
Justin, if you have anything to add before we move on to another segment.
Yeah, that interception by Tune was really bad. He had all the time in the world in that pocket in that play. Like, he probably had at least 8-9 seconds, and he just forced it to Dell.
I've been trying to, I don't want to say defend Clayton Tune, because like there's not much to defend about his play this season, but like I think after that interception, Dayon, I think he's been speaking gospel this whole season, like, because I mean 5th-year senior, I'm trying to rock with Clayton Tune. He's our guy. He looked like it the first game. And then since then, today he threw for like over 350 yards. Yeah, he threw for 366 yards passing, but it still wasn't even close to like his best game of the season. And we're already through 6 games now.
And it took almost 60 attempts to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his accuracy has been shot. So I don't know what's going on with him.
We'll leave it on that, and we'll talk more about Clayton Tune on the other side. But we'll do a tease. Did the Houston Cougars just save, at the very least, I guess the big question, did they just save Dana Holgorsen's job, which was a little bit, there was a lot of more noise after this week, but certainly that they just saved the job of certain coaching staff members on the Houston staff. We'll talk more about that on the other side of this break. Give huge shout out to our sponsor, Star Pizza Houston, as we're about to listen to one of their commercials. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family.
Hey, what'd you order? Oh, pizza and tea. Shouldn't it be ready by now? Guess we'll get the lunch special.
Never get tired of those commercials. Once again, big props to Star Pizza, and big props to Hoop and Holler Houston, the Houston Semi-Collective, the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials. I have a feeling that Big Hawk had a very, very exciting end to that game, just in terms of how it ended off. I just saw a clip where he looked very excited after the conclusion of that game. But now it's time to pay off the segment. I guess we'll go around the table. And I'll start with you, Dayon. Do you feel like the Cougars, the players, the way they rallied, just saved a lot of jobs, maybe not a lot of jobs, at least one job when it comes to the coaching staff?
Before I answer that, I'm looking at this stat. It said the first 11 drives, Houston had 64 plays, 277 yards. Last 2 drives, they had 18 plays for 126 yards. That's crazy. But, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think this one game was very save the job per se. Like I said on the podcast, I expected the players to come out and compete. Because when you step on the football field, it's about pride. And so I didn't expect them to come out and lay down. I expected them to compete all 4 quarters, and they did that. And so I don't think so. I think if anything, it's over a win that you like, see, this is what it could be. Like why are we not getting this more? And so I don't think it saved his job longer than it would have anyway.
James, I'll go to you next.
No, there's no one win that's going to save his job. I know earlier I can't remember if it was this week or last week, the Houston Chronicle reported how, as long as they show some improvement throughout the season, Fertitta is planning on giving him at least one more year. So I think obviously you see some steps there, but I don't think, if they lost this game or anything, that was going to change much. But it's a big win for the program, and like you said, it can propel them in the right direction going into the bye week and heading into the second half of the season.
Justin, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think it saves his job after one game. He's got to show a lot more within the next few games coming up. But, this game was definitely could have lost this one, and this seat would have been really hot. And I know there's probably some stuff going on behind the scenes, that we don't see. But like I said earlier in the week, that, he's going to be the coach for the foreseeable future. But I don't really believe that so far. I mean, I believe there's probably stuff going on behind the scenes, especially if things get worse throughout the season. But I don't think, this one game that's not going to cut it. He's got to probably go on a winning streak and, in the season on a big note going into next year. But I just don't see it right now. But if they lose the next couple of games, it's still pretty hot. That seed is.
And I'll toss it over to you, and I'll change it. Well, Holgorsen specifically, do you feel like it could have saved his job? And if not, I'll let you answer there.
Now, I was gonna say, I think it just bought him some time, though, for sure. And just I can't disagree with anything that's been said. Like it wasn't gonna affect him, but definitely I think it bought him some time, like an extra game. But he wasn't. I don't think he was gonna get let go until after the season, unless they had if they had a horrible season, which right now they're 3-3. Like they can turn things around. I think if they squeeze out a bowl game, I think his seat is a little colder, to say. Like even though we had high expectations, I think at this point, like a bowl game is enough for him to keep his job.
I think overall, and Dan, James, I agree with both of you. It would have been really hard to see Houston move on from Holgorsen at all, especially like the report you alluded to, James, by the Houston Chronicle, where Tillman Fertitta was the name behind it, that he was in full support of Dana Holgorsen, and that at the end of the day, we've talked about it in previous episodes. That's what speaks the most volumes. If you have Tillman Fertitta and the administration behind you, you're pretty set when it comes to being at the University of Houston. I think arguably what I could have seen changes coming when they were down 26-7, and that's going to be a turning point of the season, in my opinion. Had they stayed down 26-7, just let Memphis run away and hide, we would have been a much different tone in this game. And maybe I still don't think they would have necessarily moved away from Holgorsen, but I think we could have been much more likely to see some type of change, especially when it comes to assistant coaches. In my opinion, that's not behind any intel. Just had they kind of let go of the rope. And the way Houston was able to fight back and rally, I think it shows, one, that the locker room is still heavily invested in this coaching staff and all of their voices, which is huge for them. And
yeah,
overall,
I don't know if we can say that as far as them being invested in the coaches' voices, specifically Holgorsen, because of the way that's why I say pride and competitive juices. When you step out on the field, you ain't thinking about, I'm not going to play hard because of the coach. You just trying to go out and compete.
Yeah, I agree. I can see that point, but I think more so, I think it would have spoken volumes had it gone the other way, and it would have really looked bad. And I think it would have put a ton more pressure in the administration to force, if it's not necessarily Holgorsen, at least force someone on his staff to at least kind of take the brunt of it, in my opinion. Not just overall with this win here, it certainly cools things down a lot. Now, granted, they're 3-3. For all we know, they could end up going 3-9 the rest of the way for the season, which I highly doubt. But that could be something that ends up happening. I highly doubt that happens, and I think the way that the players showed out, to me, I think that's much more in the positive direction for Houston. But it's a start, and I'll be curious to see that they have the bye week, and something, James, you were there when Holgorsen mentioned it. They were going to take the bye week to assess a lot of things and evaluate where they are. Holgorsen said he likes to evaluate all the time, but kind of bye week again, going back to the term I used during our Potsdamer Jam podcast was kind of use it as a soft reset and kind of assess what went well, what went wrong, and trying to, at the end of the day, Dayon, you like to say this phrase often, but they are what their record says they are. And 500 is perfect for this team because they've been inconsistent. They've had good flashes. They've had bad flashes. To take a line from Doug Belk, they've had ugly flashes, both on offense, defense, and on special teams. And now it's going to be up to the entire team to be able to figure out a way to be much more consistent. That's been the story of the season to this point, and they can figure out a way to be consistent. That's going to still really help them going forward in trying to get the goals where they want to be, which is they want to get back to that American Athletic Championship game. And obviously this time they want to come out victorious.
Yeah. And could I add one thing to your point, Andy?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think like the bye week probably couldn't have come at a more perfect week because obviously with injuries and stuff, it gives you some time to heal up. But now going into it, going over the assessments, now you can focus more on what you did good rather than the bad. Because if you're going into it with, 3 straight losses, 0-2 in conference play, there's not a good taste in your mouth. Now you got something positive that you can focus on. Obviously, there's things to clean up, but you can build on the good rather than trying to, just show the bad all the time. And that's just what this team needs as, they hit that reset button and prepare for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I agree with James 100%. That's a great point because now you can build on this. You can go see if we do this consistently, this is where we can be. That's a really good point, James. I agree. And I think it comes at a great point. I think another play that's sticking out to me to what we haven't mentioned was the strip from Owens when they got the receiver downfield and he stripped and was able to recover. That was such a big play. The defense just has so much big plays. And Owens, he really sticks out to me. I think he has a ton of potential to play potentially at the next level. He really pops. He doesn't miss tackles. He's always good in coverage. He makes a lot of plays. But, that's a great point, James. I think that is a big key to having some positivity going into the bye week. And because they lose this game with the way that it looked for the most of that game, it'll be a lot of talk about the quarterbacks, the coaches, a lot of things in question. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, you could be positive. That's an amazing point, James. That going into the bye week, you could have either been 1-5 or 5-1. But then at least now you're looking at it like, hey, we're not 1-5. We're a 500 team, and we can keep winning and building from here. So, and definitely recovering from injury is going to be big. Tank Dell, he's a monster. He was holding his hip throughout the most of the fourth quarter. And he took some shots. I just want to make one more point about
big shots.
Yeah, just one more point about Clayton Tune. Although he played better, definitely in the fourth quarter, he's still not giving his receiver. He's kind of leading the receivers into the defenders to where they're taking some big hits, and it's
big hits.
And if you're a wide receiver, you can't. There's only so many of those hits you could take. So, props to Tank Dell and all the other receivers for toughening it out, but. That's another thing Clayton Tune he's going to have to think about or continue to work on is that accuracy and not missing guys. That interception at the beginning of the game, early in the game, was not it.
Man, I will say Sam Brown looks a bit more explosive than Manjack. Just to comparing the two, Manjack seems to have sure hands, but I think Brown looks a little bit more explosive. He got some good yak yards after catch. And I think they have a lot of confidence in him. They singled him up a lot and went to him a couple of times in the end zone with fade routes. And then Keyshawn Carter, man, just keeping his head down, being ready when his number is called, and he has 2 big touchdowns. I mean, you can't say enough about the skill position and them just being ready. When they got an opportunity, they made plays. And that's what I expected from them to do. They have to get more opportunities, more accuracy from the quarterback. But the skill position players – tight ends and wide receivers, they all showed up today.
Funny comment by Joe Mendes. They need to hop on that plane tonight. Dana and company don't need to get caught on Beale Street partying. That's a great point. Real quickly, I want to take a look at some of interesting things that I've seen from social media just in terms of this game. This is from our friends at the Scott and Hallman podcast. Call the ambulance, but not for me, with the Clayton Tune cut up into the meme. That's what that made me chuckle while I was scrolling through the internet. Look, we'll be taking this now from Memphis, and they have the Memphis Pyramid, Bass Pro Shops Pyramid, in the middle of downtown Houston. And then obviously a supporter of the show, Coogs. Can't wait for after the show. He's been a good supporter of the show and been active on social media. So thanks to those guys for being able to keep us entertained overall just with the show, and then being able to be active on social media following Houston's 33-32 win against Memphis, and a probable win against Memphis. Now, turning back, I want to focus on the defense a little bit real quickly. And you kind of mentioned it, how they were able to keep Houston in the game. After that first quarter, there was a lot of bend but don't break overall. When you look at the stats, they had, as a team, they had 4 sacks. They had 11 tackles for loss against Memphis. I think Nelson Caesar had a couple of great plays, particularly in the middle of that game. He ended up with a sack. He had 2.5 tackles for loss. D'Anthony Jones stepped in, had 1 sack as well. And then, Dan, you mentioned it, the stripped fumble by Javarius Owens. And Owens, he was a player that he was kind of day-to-day leading up to the game. He'd missed last week against Tulane, so that was a big difference in the secondary. And on the topic of the secondary, this is a report from the Houston Chronicle. Cornerback Alex Hogan appears to have suffered a season-ending leg injury, and they're waiting for tests to confirm. Once again, that's Joseph Duarte of the Houston Chronicle that's reporting that. Tough to hear, and hopefully, if it is serious, that he can for a speedy recovery, and hopefully it's not as serious. They're still pending on tests to confirm that. But again, that's defensive back Alex Hogan, who appears to have suffered a season-ending leg injury for Houston in their season. Brutal to hear. But just overall from the defense, we kind of touched on how they were able to keep Houston in the game, but I think kind of like that play that you mentioned of Javarius Owens, where that was off a big play that Memphis had converted. I think it was like a 20-yard play that the receiver was in the midst of, and then that strip sack, even though Houston wasn't able to convert that into points, at the very least, it stopped Memphis from putting up more points on the scoreboard, and that in and of itself was huge. And a couple of the sacks, I know we'll take the good with the bad, because there was some bad from the defense in this game, particularly when it came to 3rd and long conversions by the Memphis Tigers. And I need to double check this stat, but that's my check. I think Memphis they were 3 of 5 on 3rd and long. So if they attribute 3rd and long to everything that's 9 or over, they were 3 and 5 on 3rd and longs. The Tigers were, which that was a point of weakness for this defense. But overall, they were able to again, kind of praise I've said, they bended, but they didn't break.
Yeah, just like the offense, the defense, the way they play is like they make plays in spurts, and that's the problem with, I guess, the overall problem with the team is the consistency. Like, you'll see plays where 2-3 drives in a row defensively, they get stops or they make plays, huge plays, interceptions, fumbles, what have you. But then you'll go, basically, you'll see what exactly transpired in like the 3rd quarter and at the beginning of the 4th quarter, where they scored. I think they scored a touchdown or two touchdowns, I believe. But yeah, so if they can just become more consistent, just like, and this is the same for special teams and offense, the consistency needs to be there. They got to start games better. If you start games better and you're more consistent, it's not like you're going to stop every drive, you're going to stop a score. Like, that's not really expected. But if they can just string 3-4 drives in a row together where they hold the offense, scoreless, then that can change a lot of things.
Yeah, just when you thought when Memphis was going to bury Houston, they had a lot of chances too, and especially on 3rd and long, those big plays when they're driving down the field. And credit to the defense, they made those big stops and able to hold Memphis to field goals and led to opportunities for the offense, and then eventually the big onside kick, which led to the win.
Yeah, for sure. That first onside kick at 7 minutes, Memphis gets the ball basically at the 50 or so, and they're in prime position to, they get a quick first down. It looks like they're going to march down there and score a touchdown, and then that probably would have been the nail in the coffin. But the defense held strong, and so even those small little victories are big for this defense, and they can take those just, into the future and look for ways where they can just, like Aqib was saying with, the consistency, repeat that throughout the game, not just, in different spurts.
Dan, is there anything else you were going to add just in terms of defensive performance overall?
Yeah, I think consistently getting off the field more. I do think they leave more drives on the field in which they can get off the field more. I definitely agree with that point. I think a few times that they allow Memphis quarterback to get out of the pocket and scramble and convert first downs, in which they almost had for sacks. But I think the defense, again, they played well enough to win, and they finally kind of closed out the game. We've seen them give up. I know it's a little time, but we've seen them blow stuff with a short time. And so, I mean, I just want to give them credit for continue to fight. Latrell Bankston made a few plays in this game. I want to make sure I say his name, give him some credit. He made some plays. Jace Rogers made some plays defensively, some key tackles. I know Donovan Mutin missed an interception, which I'm sure he's mad that he probably should have caught that. But I think overall the defense, I mean, they played well enough to win. I think they can play more consistently, and stifling team is more to get the ball back to the offense even more, in which they just have to convert offense.
Yeah, real quickly, there's a stat that Houston's PR, not their PR, but their statisticians just posted on Twitter, and that's that this 19-point victory by the Houston Cougars, and it's actually Houston Athletics Communication FPR. A couple of guys are going to kill me if they heard me say PR, but regardless, the 19-point victory in the fourth quarter against Memphis is the second comeback. It was ranked as the second comeback win of 19 points in the fourth quarter against Memphis in school history. Houston trailed 34-14, 20-point deficit with 14:52 left in the fourth quarter on November 14, 2015, in Houston before they took the 35-34 win over UTEP. Or not over UTEP. That was the largest. Okay, I'm confusing with these stuff. So Houston football's 19-point victory at Memphis is tied for the fifth largest in program history. 19 points against UTEP was going back to November 22, 2018. And then the other one, which was a 20-point deficit, I guess one of that might be the largest in program history right there. But just overall, so we've talked about the offense, we've talked about the defense. I think we still got to go back to the first half, and we've talked a lot about the good, but particularly in the offense. But there were 3 quarters down, like you mentioned, where Houston was held to 7 points for most of the game, and in particular, the 2 headache drives that came down at the end of the first half, and then also following that strip sack by Javarius Owens, where they were once again within the 5 and they came away with 0 points. We talked about the botch kicks, but what about the second drive when they were at 3rd and goal from the 1-yard line? They tried to do a QB sneak with Clayton Tune. They failed to convert, and then on 4th down, they went with Brandon Campbell, and the offensive line was unable to create a push, and they got stuffed and pushed back and turned it over on downs inside Memphis's own 1-yard line. That had to be brutal. Just overall takeaways from that struggle, especially inside the 5. You'd expect to at least be able to come away, even if you can't come away with touchdowns, at least come away with some points, and they didn't in both of those tries.
Yeah, I've noticed that anytime a run is expected, and like sometimes the opposing defense is gonna expect a run, but you still should be able to come away with 3, 4, 5 yards. And it just feels like this season, especially like throughout the 6 games or so, anytime we're running the ball with short yardage to obtain and we know the UH offense is going to run that ball, it just feels like the defense knows it, but at the same time there's nothing that UH can do to get even past the line of scrimmage sometimes. So I don't know if that's something that y'all have noticed, or especially if you know that we're going to run the ball.
No, that's something that Dana Holgorsen's mentioned in the past, just in terms of the offensive line being unable to create a push up front. And it's certainly been a season-long struggle, but I think in this situation particularly, it really came back, especially on that that goal-to-goal situation from within the 1 yard line, that's really where it came back to bite the Cougars, because they were not able to create a single push, especially when you get down there. You're so close, especially to the way they tried to score just to be able to punch it in, and that's really when bully ball comes in. And down is something you've mentioned in our PSJ Potsdam and Jammer podcast episode, where at the end of the day, it's a battle in the trenches, and the offensive line for Houston, more often than not this season, has struggled to be able to create that push up against opposing defensive lines.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, one thing, like, other than Brandon Campbell's 34-yard run today, Houston's best running play wasn't designed running plays. It was Clayton Tune scrambling, creating something out of nothing. And so, like, those aren't even often, you can't even put that, like, those yards on the offensive line, because it's more Tune, you know, avoiding sacks, making something out of nothing. So when that's your best running play, that shows that there definitely needs to be some changes or improvements, I guess, in terms of, you know, getting that push up front, because, you know, like you were talking about, you know, they had the ball at the 1 yard line, 3rd and 1. Tune QB sneaks, can't get in. Campbell can't get in. Like, you should be able to get 1 yard and 2 tries with those guys. You can't rely on, you know, Tune to bail you out with some crazy play with his legs to be your entire run game.
Yep, you got to put it on the offensive line. I mean, but at the same time, you have to give credit to Brandon Campbell, because on that 30+ yard run, it was either 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 where he broke through the line of scrimmage. He was able to get outside and make something out of nothing. And so I think the offensive line definitely, like you guys are saying, has to create more holes and give the running backs more opportunity to be more effective. And at the same time, maybe call different runs instead of trying to run right up the gut. Maybe go off tackle or go to pistols, different runs that they can call. Maybe a read option, speed option, use Clayton's ability to get outside the pocket. But I mean, you can't. I don't know if a winning recipe is Clayton throwing the ball 50+ times going forward. I don't know if that's a recipe for victory. It worked tonight, and they'll get the credit. He'll get credit for the victory. But like you guys are saying, the offensive line has to create more holes for sure for the running game. You should be able to get 1 yard for sure.
Even aside from that, like, I haven't seen much trickery or scheme in this offense. Like,
yeah,
it's just 1st, 2nd down. Maybe you try to do a passing play. Maybe they'll have some trips right. That's as crazy as it gets. Like, which is like not what we were used to. Like last season, we saw all sorts of, you know, types of looks offensively, and then this season it just seems so predictable. And you see that from the opposing teams. You saw that from Kansas, their trickery. You saw that even from today, from Memphis through 3 quarters. You know how I guess like dynamic their offenses can be as opposed to, you know, Houston's offense. And that's like something, if we can bring that, you know, dynamic play calling back and the playmaking, then like I think we'll be just fine for the rest of the season. But we got to see that.
Justin, you got anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, definitely on the goal line situations. Like when you try to punch it in like twice and unable to execute, at least try to run, at least try to go a quick slant up the middle, or at least a play action, get Clayton Tune running to the outside, move the defense the other way, and try to go to the receiver out there on the side of the end zone or something. I mean, at least got to mix it up a little bit in those situations because, you know, the offensive line's not creating holes. I mean, at least switch it up just a little bit.
Yeah, know your personnel.
And this point right here, I put it on the screen earlier. Chris Evans is back after last week. He was a Clayton Tune believer from last week against Tulane. He said that I mean, you see it right there. I stated before, Clayton Tune equals GOAT. And I put that comment on because I think it's an interesting point that you guys have brought up, just in terms of it has seemed at times like play calling has been a lot more vanilla, for the lack of a better phrase. And it would be interesting to see if they could get Clayton Tune in maybe more RPO situations where he's making reads, and just giving him more responsibilities at the line. That'd be interesting to see if they added more variety to it. But I think certainly, Dan, I agree with your point that Houston probably does not want Tune throwing the ball almost 60 times for the game. And like you mentioned, it's not going to be a recipe for success. Now, the problem has been they haven't been able to consistently be able to have a rushing attack that's reliable overall. So that's been one of the biggest issues for this offense to really lack in terms of versatility.
They've lacking continuity and rhythm. And one thing Andre Webb kept pointing out was Clayton Tune's inability. I don't want to say inability because he can't do it. He just wasn't going through progressions. He would go through, look at one receiver, he's not open, then it would either check down or roll out or just do something instead of going through 1, 2, 3, 4, head moving across the scanning the field and actually looking like a fifth-year senior quarterback. But let's just focus on the good. I mean, he played well, ended the game good. He made tough plays, a big run. I mean, it's great. Like James said earlier, it's good to go in the bye with good film, good positivity to build on. And so hopefully something needs to change offensively still. I don't think this don't need to be this is like fool's gold as far as it needs to be something changed because this offense, the way it's looked through the majority of games, isn't satisfying. It isn't winning football.
And if I may, Andy, I'll play devil's advocate just for a second because we've seen, and then that inconsistency that Deon mentioned, like that also does attribute to Houston's lack of success, running the ball because you have Campbell, and then you also have Snead running, and then you have Tajon Henry, and those three you've seen like these guys banged up from week to week. So it is kind of hard to get that rhythm, especially with running backs. Like it's a huge rhythm game. Like you look back to like Arian Foster and like the way he played, in the past, he was like a rhythm type player, and he didn't have success earlier on in his career, but the more reps he got, the more amazing he was, for the Texans. So just like rhythm is a big thing with these running backs, and like you see a lot of just the injuries, and that could also play to. I mean, I know I kind of harped on the dynamic play calling, the lack thereof, but I guess with the injuries, it's very tough to like have some trick plays in your bag because maybe you're teaching a wide receiver or a running back a new play that they haven't been introduced to or practiced with.
Well, we'll put a pin on it for right now. On that note, Dayon, like you mentioned it, just a Houston-Memphis rivalry. It always seems like, especially football and men's basketball in particular, it always seems like there's just an extra buzz when Memphis and Houston meet. And it's a perfect segue because I did want to add this clip. It's a screenshot of the TV broadcast, and that was a sign by a Memphis fan that said, "Hey, Houston, the Big 12 wants to refund your money." And that was something I caught it. That was after Houston I think they had just had to punt again at midfield. It looked like Clayton Tune was frustrated. Obviously, we know kind of the setup behind the rivalry, just in terms of Memphis. I mean, for the lack of a better phrase, they're salty that they're not going to the Big 12. Houston is, but I agree with you, Dayon. I think this is going to be a rivalry, especially. It always seems like these games come down to the very last play, regardless if it's on men's basketball, if it's football. The last couple of seasons, there's always just something extra about when Houston and Memphis get together.
Yep, and the states aren't far apart. You heard the broadcast team talking about how Memphis coaches and players was amped to play Houston, how they want to send Houston out of the conference with the L. And so, I mean, it definitely is a real rivalry between the two programs. It's back and forth, basketball and football. I would love to see it continue once we go to the Big 12, football and basketball, especially in the non-conference. It'd be a good game for Memphis. It'd be a good game for Houston in basketball and football. And so Memphis is a good program. Overall, I think they've been putting a lot of talent in the NFL, NBA, just like Houston as well. And so they're a good program. You got to give credit where it's due. They do put out talent.
Yeah, I think the reason they didn't get that jump to like a Power 5 conference was like it could be partially because like with the scandal situation with the men's program. I don't know if you guys have more insight to that, but they're definitely like a team. Memphis is a program, both basketball and football, that's like deserving of something like a Power 5 move, much like, Houston, Cincinnati, and so on and so forth.
I think it has to do with like the market size and stuff like that. But yeah, there's definitely, like you said, they've definitely proven their worth in different sports. But I mean, in terms of, I wouldn't say there's been a ton of rivalry since UH has been in the American, but Memphis seems like the closest to, a true rivalry game, like Andy and everyone else was mentioning, just with how many times these football games, men's basketball games have come down to, the last second and just crazy things happening. And obviously you can see, on social media and stuff, Memphis fans hate Houston and Houston fans hate Memphis. They're going at each other. So I mean, this would be the closest thing you could call a rivalry in the AAC, and maybe, and hopefully we'll get to see a little more of it even when UH is in the Big 12.
Much better than a Rice rivalry. It's not even a rivalry.
Much as we talked about UH, Memphis choked away this game, though. I mean, just like UH did last year to Texas Tech, this was like in the same ballpark. Memphis just like gave this game away.
Absolutely, and that's something that we haven't touched on because we've been looking at it from the Houston perspective, but Memphis allowed the onside kick. They allowed the 100-yard kickoff return touchdown. They allowed Houston to drive down the field and score a touchdown. The drive before that, they were they were held to a couple of 3-and-outs early in the fourth quarter after they scored that first touchdown in the fourth quarter. They were held to just a few field goals. They really struggled. That's the other perspective of it, where the Tigers absolutely did choke on it when it comes to the game because they had that in hand, and that's where there was over 100 teams had not lost when they were in a position that Memphis was in today, and the Tigers, well, they choked it away. You can't say it any other way.
And their quarterback, he really was just a game manager all game. He wasn't anything spectacular. He wasn't making spectacular throws. He did make a couple of good runs, but he wasn't anything just crazy like what we've seen from Frank Harris and the plays that Tech quarterback made and Kansas quarterback. He wasn't anything like that. So, I mean, I didn't think that Houston would come back and win, but I thought it's chances for them too, because Memphis isn't just making crazy play after play after play. It's not like we're not stopping them. And so, I mean, for the offense to finally come alive, it's just like about time. Thank you. That's how I felt anyway.
Going back to the quarterback play, let's be honest, the best throw of the night came from I think Gabriel Rogers is his name, the Memphis wide receiver.
Yes.
That was a heck of a throw. We need to acknowledge that.
Yes, it was.
I mean, a receiver putting that on a dime, obviously, on
the run too.
Yeah, just
that was crazy.
That was crazy. I still can't believe he made that throw, but yeah,
it was a perfect dart. Yeah, I mean, he put that right on the money. And real quickly, because we're pending, we're about to hear from Dana Holgorsen, pending a few minutes. But I did want to point this shout out that Norberto and Juan Miranda had pointed out. And I don't want to say way too much from it because this is a post-game show on the football team, but we do need to shout out the volleyball team that they just picked up. James, correct me if I'm wrong. They just picked up their 14th win of the season to improve to 14-2, and they just beat a previously undefeated ranked UCF team that entered the Fertitta Center 23 in the country in one of the polls for volleyball. And when you look at the volleyball team, they beat them in 4 sets, and they've only lost 2 games, one of which came against number 1 Texas. So obviously a big shout out to the volleyball team, and really a shout out to Coach David Rare that has really turned around that program. And since he's been here in the span of 3 seasons, I believe, going back to 2019. So it's always good when you see a lot of the programs across the University of Houston thrive. But another comment by Gary, I don't want to butcher your last name. So Gary, he said, so maybe a 4th and 20 choke wasn't so bad. It's still too soon. It's still too soon to mention it. And that just goes back to the frustration of the season where that was one of the early turning points of the season. I guess if you break down the season from bye weeks, that's going to be a play that haunts Houston for the foreseeable future. Because if they get that stop, they're sitting at 3-0 heading into that Kansas game, or 2-0 heading into the Kansas game. And potentially could be a much different story of this season if they can get that stop. But Any other takeaways that you guys wanted to add as we're about to hear from Holgorsen? We'll go
No.
around the table. Justin, Aqib, you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I think after the bye week, the schedule kind of gets pretty soft for Houston. You got a 1-3 Navy, got a 1-4 South Florida, and you got an SMU team that's 2-3, and they're pulling a 2019 U of H. They got a lot of guys that are potentially sitting out to redshirt and potentially transfer. So pretty much winnable games the next three matchups, and even against Temple about 4 weeks away after the bye.
Yeah, and that's something that we had mentioned heading into the season. I don't think anyone envisioned Kansas to be on the tear that they have been to start the football season. But yeah, that's a great point that you bring up, Justin. You know, they opened the second half of the season for or at least after the bye at Navy. I know Navy's 1-2 in conference play. They're not. We know what they're gonna, and it's not gonna be a gimme win because Houston has struggled against teams. I think Kansas is on a whole nother level than Navy, but I mean, you know that they're gonna have the triple option offense that always, depending on the year, is gonna give Houston fits and problems. And they have to play South Florida. I think the biggest game remaining for Houston, at least when it comes to the regular season, is November 5 at SMU. That's probably the toughest, at least on paper, remaining. But then Temple, East Carolina, and Tulsa to close out the regular season. So you make up a great point. And again, it just goes back to the importance of this game against Memphis that they were able to pick up a good win because if had they fallen 0-2 in conference play, even though they have those 6 games remaining in against American Athletic Conference opponents, it would have certainly been really difficult to, even if they win out, to get out the hole because Memphis would have been 3-0 in conference play. Cincinnati seems like they haven't missed a beat, even though they've lost all the starter, all the key pieces from last season's team. And that's just a testament to Luke Fickell and what he's been able to do at Cincinnati. But it certainly seems like the Bearcats are towards the top. And then obviously, of course, you also have UCF. So it would have probably been a insurmountable hole, to be honest, had they fallen to Memphis in this game.
Yeah, I think we should at least finish like you mentioned those games, Andy. I don't, aside from SMU, and SMU right now, they're not really playing, terribly well. I guess, they're 2-3 right now. So even that team, it's not going to be easy. None of the games are going to be easy. I don't look forward to some of these games. I feel like a lot of them are going to be nail biters, but at the same time, like UH could easily go 6-0 the rest of the season, but then they can also go like 3-3 or 2-4 or 4-2. So it's kind of crazy like that we're at this point, but you still can come up with potentially, like, if something goes down with like Cincinnati, if they lose a game or two, like you could still look at the Cougs and think like, you could still possibly make a conference championship. It's still very possible. Like the teams that we play are not as good as Kansas, who we play. They're not as good as Memphis. Some of them are not even as good as like UTSA, who we already beat. So I just want to put that out there for sure. Like you could still look forward to the season. There's still a lot of games left.
Dan, James, is there anything else you guys would like to add? Just in terms of where the program is, and Aqib, you make up a great point, and they end up being 6-6 the way things have gone the first 6 games. That would be a very fitting record, at least how things have gone so far. But again, they've put themselves in position to really bounce back and put that tough start in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add like what y'all been saying. I think a conference championship, playing in one, I don't think hosting one's really a reality now because you got 3 losses, and if you tie with someone, it comes down to your non-conference record. But playing in one is still a very real possibility, which is kind of crazy to say because I don't think any of us thought that going into this game, and especially, going into the fourth quarter. Obviously, Cincinnati will probably end up, with the best record. But if Tulane slips up a couple of times, you're right in there. And so, yeah, UH, they have the schedule that obviously they got to take each opponent seriously. But they have this, their schedule sets up nicely over the second half, where if they are going to make a run, they got the right teams they're playing against to do it.
It seems that way. I agree, but I thought the schedule was nice to have a good season.
Oh, for sure.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, but man, this just really, the way the season went, I think it really highlights to me how hard it is to win a game. You hear Kevin Sampson saying a lot, and I think it really sticks out to me this year how hard it is to win one game. It seems favorable, but like I can just say it. I mean, you can go 3-3, you can go 4-2, you can go 6-0, and none of it will surprise you. And so I think each game is going to be a fight.
We could have easily been 1-5. Like,
thank you.
We could be 1-5 right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that Holgorsen acknowledged during one of his radio shows leading up to the week. Because on Monday he used the counter argument where they could be 4-1, but he could have. I mean, he acknowledged that they could easily be 0-5, and this one against Memphis didn't come easy whatsoever. It was a good comeback, but it came down to the last possession. It was an improbable comeback. But on that note, I wanted to give one final shout out to Hoop and Holler, the Houston Sports Micro Collective. Like I mentioned before, when we saw the Big Hawk commercial, they are the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials. You saw the Big Hawk one today, but obviously we've seen the DeAnthony Jones and Sac Avenue commercial they've had in the past. I'm sure they're going to have more commercials soon upcoming with the men's basketball season right around the corner. And on that note, we'll give them special thanks for being one of the sponsors of this Let's Rage Coogs show. And I take this opportunity for anyone listening there. If you have a business that you want to sponsor it with a lot of Houston Cougar fans that are watching, the audience keeps growing and growing each week. And we're going to do this for the men's basketball season as well. We'll have more packages starting soon. We do have primary sponsorship for the first 5 men's basketball games of the season, but after that, it lets up. And obviously, we always have spots like you see Hoop and Honda there for banner spots. If you have your own commercials, you want to do live reads or anything like that, we're here to do business. To quote the new commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark. So feel free to reach us out at letsragecoogs@gmail.com. And on that note, we will hear from head coach Dana Holgorsen and what he had to say following Houston's improbable 33-32 win against the Memphis Tigers.
Can't get any crazier, right? Man, I don't know what to say, man. I mean, I'm just so proud of our coaches and players. I've never been around a group that's resilient. Obviously we're sitting here at 3-3 with every game was like that. I mean, obviously there had to be some pretty unbelievable individual plays out there to be able to get us in that position, towards the end of the game. I'm sure a lot of people turned it off, but our guys just keep playing. They were resilient after last week with losing the way that we did last week. And a lot of noise, deservingly so. Our guys blocked it out and just practiced their butt off. And came into this game, and once again, it's the same thing. I mean, we're down 10. Ball's not bouncing our way. We get the ball on the turnover in the third quarter, get it down to the 2-inch line and can't punch it in, off the heels of, missing a chip shot field goal, to get points and giving up plays on defense. And then just at the end, just making it work, man, it obviously feels very good to be on this side of it.
And is it an overstatement to say that this is the type of win that, you go into a bye week that can certainly maybe turn things around? Yeah, JD, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this thing was going to go one way or another after this game. Next week was about to be challenging. Sitting at 2-4 with, regardless of what the score was or whatever, it was going to be challenging. There's no doubt about it. We were going to have to reassess a lot of things, and now we got momentum, and I mean, 6 games where it comes down to the last play. I mean, I'm exhausted. Our coaches are exhausted. Our players are banged up. We had more guys go down with injuries today that is unfortunately probably going to be some season-ending stuff for some starters. It's one thing after another, and so it's about to get challenging, but now we can go into that bye week with some momentum.
we're 1-1 in the conference and we're live. And hopefully we can continue to build on this.
Chase's kickoff return there, I don't think he had been back there all year.
He has not.
Was that just?
Well, Golden went out with the back. What's the severity of it? I don't know. We're down people back there, and Jace was the next one in. And we planned on that all week. If something happened to either Golden or Peyton, then Jace was the next guy in. He's a decent returner. He did it in JUCO. He did it in high school. I've always worried about the ball security aspect of it. And you look at that run; he almost dropped the ball out there in the open field. But he came to the sidelines and he said, "I told you so. You believe in me now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. And it's my bad. I should have had you back there before." Jace is a good kid, competitor. One of the fiercest competitors that we got, and for him to spark us right there, yeah, good for him, man.
You went to, you looked at Tank a lot tonight, but late. Was it something with Keyshawn that you saw, or like with Clayton that y'all wanted to get him?
Yeah, we just based on what they did, they were starting to drop a lot of people, so we needed to get into some 10 personnel. We didn't have a big plan with 10 personnel. 11 and 12 is kind of what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We're thin at receiver, but we did it before the half, and we marched it all the way down there in 10. So we talked about it at halftime, and Keyshawn's a guy that we need to get the ball to. He's a good player, and he's been struggling a little bit. He's done a great job of hanging in there. We know he can make plays, so getting into 10 personnel was more scheme and getting him on the field as well.
So once again, that was head coach Dana Holgorsen for Houston, and that video was courtesy of the University of Houston Athletics. You heard Houston Chronicle reporter Joseph Duarte in the background there, but a couple of things that Dana Holgorsen mentioned there. He said it himself just how big this win was for Houston, and really a win that they needed heading into their bye week. That had they lost that game, it would have put a very, very different mood of just the season overall, especially where the program was following that loss to Tulane.
Yeah, you would have had to stew on it for a long time because you got the bye week, and obviously there last week after the loss to Tulane, you could sense the frustration from the players. Donovan Mutin flat out stated, how frustrated they were. So to, have that stew for another week and just, like you mentioned earlier in the show, Andy, 5 out of 6 games to come down to the last possession. To lose, if you would have lost this game, losing 4 of those 5, that's just tough. And there's no quick fix, and you can't get that out of your mind. So to have the flip the switch a little bit and have the ball bounce their way, that's just huge. Just for the mindset going into this bye week.
Yep. I just noticed it was cool to see Jace Rogers, tell coach, do you believe in me now? That's stuff that it does take guts to just tell off a coach that you need to believe in me more, and Holgorsen agreed. He didn't just put his head down or whatever. So that's cool to see.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as Holgorsen was talking, it was just making me think about the point that James made, how perfect timing to get this win going into the bye, because he talked about the much-needed chatter or much-deserved chatter around the program and different challenges that they would have been faced with as the momentum wouldn't have been on their side. And so you get this win going into the bye week. Now you can rest up a little bit, focus on some of the good, highlight a lot of the bad, and still harp on the possibility of reaching your goal of a conference championship, staying alive.
Justin, anything else that stood out to you from Holgorsen's clip?
Yeah, especially that players get the rest up going into the bye week and freshen up for the next half of the season. And unfortunately, he said that some players went down, and I guess we'll have some more news on that. And Andy, you retweeted earlier about potentially losing Alex Hogan for the season. That's actually a big loss. So it's just going to be probably a next man up mentality going into the second half. Just like he said with Jace Rogers, just putting him in there and able to go 100 yards for the kickoff return.
And that's something that's been the story of the season for Houston early on, having to face a ton of injuries. I mean, even going back to spring, and that's something that's kind of been lost, especially in that running backs group. They lost Alton McCaskill in the spring to the ACL injury. I believe that's the knee injury he suffered in the spring. He was going to be your running back one heading into the season, and they would have had a lot more depth with Brandon Campbell, Tajon Henry, Stacey Sneed, running back McCaskill. That would have been a big boost to the Houston offense. But then even into this season, Derek Parrish, who honestly was on pace to have a really, really good season for Houston. And I think it was D'Anthony Jones who said he's one of the best players that he's seen at Houston. That's counting Peyton Turner, Logan Hall, guys like that, which is high praise from Jones. But overall, that's exactly right, Justin. That next man up mentality. I think Houston's at a point where they're used to it. And Aqib, I agree with you. The thing that stood out to me was that quote there where he said about Chase Rogers. But you like to see it because again, what that shows that level of commitment. In my opinion, that shows that level of commitment from the team. That one, they want to show that they can make plays on their own, and they're. One, from a athlete standpoint, they're obviously going to be really confident in themselves. But two, I think that just shows their commitment overall to kind of what Tank Dell said during the week, winning. And that's really what matters. And he was able to make a big play for Houston that was a shot in the arm for the Cougars and really helped in that rally.
You know what it also could be about? We know our players have heard the chatter about Holgorsen talking about not having the talent as far as Big 12 talent or good enough talent to quote unquote win at a championship level. And that could be some of that coming from that and coming from quotes like that as well.
That goes back to exactly what you said, Deon, earlier about like pride. Like
Yeah,
they've been hearing so many things, especially from their own head coach. And like to me, I'm thinking like this whole game, the reason why they didn't give up or quit is they're trying to prove to the coaching staff to say, we're not sorry. We had one loss throughout like all of last season during the regular season. So I think they had some things to prove, and they kind of showed it that they're capable of, like, because we could still easily be like 5-1 right now, maybe have a loss to Kansas because Kansas played so well, but that could easily be the case right now if you just clean up some things.
James, any thoughts to that quote that Holgorsen said about Chase Rogers?
No, I mean, I think y'all hit on most of the main points, and it's good it's got to feel good for a guy like Jace to. You can talk all you want, but to actually go out there and put it on the field, and to especially you mentioned earlier in the show how he was the one on Memphis's first drive that committed that pass interference penalty, which extended it and led to their first touchdown of the game. So to come back and just, give them a spark like that, and on your first time, first opportunity of the season,
crib it.
I mean, it was huge. And I mean, when I saw that, I was looking for flags because,
no flags. I was looking for it too, James.
I was like, there's got to be some flag. That's just been UH's story. But, to have a clean play like that, just huge.
Absolutely. And guys, this is a milestone on Let's Rage Coogs. This is the first show that has lasted 2 days because we are officially on Saturday, October 8th. It is midnight on the Central Time Zone. And I did want to shout out UH Cougs fan for his $10 contribution to the show, adding to Juan Miranda and Ben Mora. We thank you guys because that support helps us keep going and continue to do this post-game show. And like I mentioned before that Holgorsen clip, we're not going anywhere. It's just a start. We still have the remaining 6 regular season games for the football team. And obviously we still have the men's basketball season, highly anticipated men's basketball season coming right up. So we're not going anywhere with Let's Rage Coogs, the unofficial post-game show of UH football and men's basketball for the foreseeable future. And who knows, if we continue to grow, how big it can expand. One final thing I want to touch on before we kind of wrap things up, and that's really what Gary just brought up. Love him, or I think he was gonna say love some Christian Trahan.
Man.
And again, we kind of mentioned at the top, but he has been, it's been very obvious that he's become a focal point for Houston the past 2 games. And he didn't necessarily come away with the receptions in last week's game. Much different story this game. And just he adds a different element for Houston. And even in a couple of the goal-to-goal situations where we saw they would just dump it down at him. And I mean, he gives the ability for the offense for him to be able to break a couple of plays and go down the field and make bigger plays.
For real, man. Much love to him. His ability to run after a catch really was a difference maker today. He showed great hands. He's really a 3-down tight end. He can block, he can catch, good after catch. I mean, he had a really big game and a huge impact on this game. He needs the ball more. He needs to be a focal point of the offense.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing, I think it was after the Rice game, Dana talked about just how he'd been battling some unspecified injuries and stuff, and he'd been limited in practice. So, I think the sign that they're getting him more involved, these past 2 weeks is a positive trend, and where, he's at that health level where they expect him. And now, like y'all have all mentioned, they've designed plays to get him involved, which we did not see over the first 3-4 weeks of the season. The only thing, you noticed about Trahan was the coin toss over those 2 weeks. Of course, today, his streak, 8-0 streak, came to an end. Still incredible streak. I've never seen anyone, go 8-0 on the coin toss. But, to get him, this was a major confidence boost, too, because, last week they gave him opportunities. He came up short to make some of these huge catches. And for him to be the one, it won't, show up on the stat sheet major, but to be the one that recovers that onside kick, like, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And
he's been big. I just want to say, like today, he had, I think, 73 yards receiving, I believe. And then I guess the other 3 previous games that he got to play in, he only had 45 yards receiving. So he totaled more than what he had during the, however much of the season he played. So that's a big sign. And I think the team's just also better in general when we can get the ball to him, and also, of course, Tank Dell.
Absolutely, and I think the only thing I was going to add is you mentioned that coin toss, James. That's something certainly early on. It's what he became known for, but I'm sure Trahan and the rest of the team will they'll take losing a coin toss compared to the win any day of the week, and that just goes to show, again, just going back to resilience of the team. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this game. Justin, I'm going to toss it over to you. Any final thoughts on Houston's win over Memphis? Once again, the final score 33-32. Houston, a much needed win, improves to 3-3 and 1-1 against the American Athletic Conference. Memphis drops to 4-2, and they are still 2-1 against American Athletic Conference opponents.
Yeah, man, it's just a big win to get off their backs. I mean, they struggled the last few weeks, and just overall bad offensive play against Tulane, and then just 3 quarters here against Memphis, and then finally get some receivers open in the field, kind of spread out the field, make some plays. I mean, just really a big win going into the bye week, but really my goal for the next half of the season, 4 quarters of good football, because I said it last year after the Texas Tech loss at NRG Stadium, they were really, under Holgorsen, they've been a one-half team, and this season they've been just a one-quarter team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something I hadn't thought of. That's certainly been a theme overall, even just thinking back to 2019 when they would have really good halves, whether it's the first half or second half, but they haven't been able to put together complete performances. It seemed like that's something that they were heading in the right direction in 2021. And then once again, this season, it's been much more difficult. Aqib, I'll toss it over to you. Any final thoughts on Houston's 33-32 win?
No, I'm just happy that we came out with the win, because like James mentioned earlier with the bye week, had we gone into the bye week with a 2-4 record, that just has like a nasty taste in your mouth, like as opposed to being 3-3. You can think now like, okay, we're at 500 and we can continue growing from there.
Absolutely, and most importantly, that they avoid falling 0-2 against American Athletic Conference foes. And this game, a big game that they wanted and needed to take, especially like we mentioned against a big rivalry opponent against Memphis. Saw the sign, we put up the sign where there's a lot of animosity between the two fan bases, and it just feels good to be able to. It always feels good when Houston's able to come out on top against the Memphis Tigers. Dayan, I'm gonna toss it over to you. Any final thoughts on this game?
Only thing I have to say is go Cougs, man. Go Cougs. That's it.
I mean, that's the perfect note to end on. I'm going to thank every single one of you guys for being able to hop on. And I can't necessarily see the timer on it because it's blocked on the light I have, but it looks like we've had another 90-minute plus show. I said the first show that extends 2 days. We're now 12:10 in the morning on Saturday, October 8th. Thank you guys for hopping on. As always, James, I'm going to toss it over to you. Where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter at JDM2186, and then all my UH coverage is on thedailycougar.com.
Justin, where can people find you?
What's up, guys? I can find me at J Barbosa, PXP. Go Cougs.
And Aqib, where can people find you and your work? You're muted, sir.
My bad. It's late. Yeah, y'all can find me at Twitter and Instagram at Aqib Gazi MMA.
And Dayan, where can people find you?
Like it's shown on the screen, you can find me on all social medias at Dayan Dunlap. Give me a follow. I might follow back. I don't know.
And we'll hit on the perfect teaser. Yeah, Juan Miranda, you said it right there. In terms of the Memphis animosity, King Jaja, with the rumors right there, Duke is playing Houston in men's basketball as well. That was Jeff Goodman who reported it, and I can't confirm anything on the record, but that would be a really good scrimmage for people to be able to see, but emphasize it is a scrimmage. If it does happen, I guess we'll say that it's a report. Once again, the final score, Houston wins it 33-32 over Memphis, in a probable win that saw Houston overcome a 19-point deficit. Like I mentioned, thank you guys for hopping on and being able to help host this show. For those of you guys watching on audio-only platforms, be sure to follow us on Instagram or TikTok. Let's Rage Coogs. That's ELTSREGECOOGS on those platforms, all lowercase, or you can follow us on Twitter at PAWDSLAMAJAMA. Also, be sure to follow the Potsdam Pajama YouTube channel. We just hit 300 subscribers. We're on the road to 1,000, and we are looking to continue to, once we get to 1,000, we're really going to start cooking, and your one-stop shop for all things Houston Cougars men's basketball, football, and women's basketball. And that's going to do it for today's episode. So thank you guys again, and we will leave off with this clip from the Back Ab account. Big up for us, never gave up, and that is Doug Buff, Dana Holgorsen. I believe that is Brian Early with a win once again. Let's Rage Coogs. Thank you guys, everyone, for watching.